Hey everybody. So in this video I'm going to show you what you could end up getting when you purchase a motherboard on eBay that is listed as parts only or for repair. So I ordered this motherboard on eBay. It's a ASRock B450M-PRO4 and it was listed for about $30 or so. It wasn't really that much. And I decided I was going to go ahead and buy it, take the risk, see what I end up with. Might be a good video for this channel. But this is what I end up getting right here. So they shipped it in a motherboard box, which this is a B450M Steel Legend motherboard box. So basically the person who sold this board replaced his motherboard with a new one and shipped it in the new motherboard box. Okay. This is how it was packed. Packing was definitely not that great. I do not like these airbags because first time the box hits a bump, yeah, once they pop, yeah, they're useless. We have the motherboard inside of an anti-static bag that is damaged. Yeah, the bag is definitely seen a rough ride. Yeah. So we're gonna show you the motherboard here. So not only that, I forgot to show you this. In the box, we have a very small surface mount 8-pin IC package. It's like, okay, wonderful. This is a BIOS chip. Yeah. Had I noticed it in the picture on eBay listing, I probably would not have bought this, but I bought it. So here we are. Let me show what's going on here. So basically this person must have corrupted their BIOS. I don't know what exactly they done. They must have corrupted their BIOS or something. So they're like, okay, let's go ahead and replace the BIOS chip. Apparently this person has zero experience with soldering, or at least with surface mount soldering, because we got one heck of a mess right there. I don't know if this dude decided to use like chip quick or what, but I mean, or he might have just ripped it off the board. So the very first thing I'm going to do is try to clean this up. And I mean, if you just look at all this, you see what looks to be fine powder on here. It looks like this guy might have taken a freaking Dremel and just ground this chip off the board. You know, there is a device out there called a hot air station. They're about 30 to 40 bucks on the internet. I have one at my place of work. Need to buy one for here. But those come in handy for removing surface mount packages like this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the soldering iron, get some solder wick, see if I can clean this up, see if the pads are salvageable. The pads that we're concerned about are actually, let's see here, those 8 pads there. So we'll see what we can get here. So literally this seller did not know any information in the listing about what was wrong with the board. He just listed it as parts only for repair, basically trying to get rid of his e-waste, more or less. If I was selling on eBay, I would be a little more upfront and honest and mention in the listing what was wrong. I would have said BIOS is corrupt, needs a new BIOS chip, might be damage to the motherboard itself. You know, could have been a little more honest, but anyways, there we are. So get you another look at that. Since I got the camera mounted on the stand. So I'm not sure if that's like chip quick or what that is. Like he tried to prepare this board to install that surface mount IC, but yeah, that's pretty terrible. Alright, so there's actually a couple ways you can actually install surface mount chips like that. One way is to use a solder paste like Chip Quick. Another way is you can use a soldering pencil or just a soldering iron. However, it's very, you got to be very precise with it because you're dealing with a pretty small component. I have actually done surface mount soldering before. Haven't really covered it on this channel, but anyways, what I'm going to do, as I think I mentioned, I'm going to try to clean this up, see if those pads are salvageable, and if they are, I'm going to see about that BIOS chip. I might reach out to the seller and say I need an explanation on this BIOS chip. Did you have it programmed? Because you can't just put a blank chip on the motherboard and expect it to work. You got to program it with the BIOS. So anyways, let's go ahead and see if we can clean this up. So the chances of saving this motherboard are honestly going to be very slim, but I figured I would try to see what I could do. Now let's see what's currently here right now. So what I'm using right now is desoldering wick or desoldering braid. The way this works is it's a copper braid and it has flux in it, and it helps absorb solder off of the surface. So I'm not exactly sure what this is right here. And I'll be honest, this could be a total loss. However, it'd still be worth it just for this video. Honestly, I'm not even sure what that is. Is that even solder? Is that plastic? I'm thinking this person took a Dremel and tried to Dremel the chip off of the board. I mean, this is a freaking mess. So if I can get this cleaned up, I will attempt to resurrect this board. Yeah, this must have been some sort of like solder paste. I'm thinking whoever tried to repair this board didn't know what the heck they were doing. Not sure what this is over here. Looks like they got. It looks like they got some over on this freaking little header here. I gotta be very careful here. Yep. Golly. Don't know what to say. This is a real mess. Now this space down here, I don't think it exactly matters in this case because I'm looking at the new chip and it does not have a copper bottom on it. So some chips actually have the pins as well as a contact on the face of the chip or the bottom of the chip that actually touches the PCB. Yeah, honestly, I don't know what the heck they were doing here. I guess so far, I mean, we have managed to clean or somewhat clean all 8 of the pads there. So the thing is, if this chip is already flashed, for example, if this chip is already flashed with the BIOS for this board, I could go ahead and install it, but the thing is, if it's not, That'd be just a waste of time putting this on there. You would need a special programmer to program this chip, and the good news is Amazon has them for less than $20. Okay, so these pads over here around where the 8-pin package goes, where the 8-pad package goes, they're not really of any concern because they're not used. But I'm going to try to see what I can do to try to clean this up a little bit more. Okay, so let's go ahead and have a look at our chip here. So it is a Win Bond, and there's a part number. I can't quite see it on the LCD of the camera. Okay, everybody, so I've taken the time to try to clean this area up a little bit so it don't look quite as bad as it did before. So the crazy thing is, I mentioned earlier in the video about a USB programmer you can order on the internet to reflash these chips. You know, they have USB EEPROM programmers that come with a little accessory. Looks like a pair of pliers, and it literally has contacts on both sides to grip onto all 8 pins of that EEPROM package. So, in theory, you don't even have to remove the BIOS chip from the board. So, like I say, I'm not real sure why this person removed this BIOS chip from the board, especially considering this programmer that I mentioned of is just $14. Like, for real. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go ahead and install this replacement EEPROM chip he has. He, she, whoever. Because the thing is, if it's not flash, what I'll do is I'll just order the programmer. That way I can flash it with it on the board. So this is the EEPROM chip right there. It's a good view of it right there. You can see it's a Win Bond chip. I looked up a picture of this motherboard on Newegg's website, because Newegg always tends to have good pictures of motherboards. And the little chip was facing with pin 1 oriented toward the top. So pin 1 is that little dot where my thumb is, right there. That needs to be oriented right there. So we're going to install this, and as I think I mentioned earlier in the video, there's multiple ways you can install surface mount components like this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just set it into place, and we'll use the soldering pencil to solder it in carefully. And the thing is, if we put too much solder there, we can use the desoldering wick to remove the excess solder. Now, of course, Murphy's Law says that when you need your tweezers, you can't find them. So I'm having to go without tweezers for this. Normally, I would much prefer to have a pair of tweezers when working with surface mount components like this, but this EEPROM package is actually bigger than, let's say, for example, an SMD LED. So we're just going to line that up as good as we can. Get it on top of the pads. So the pads themselves extend out a tad bit further than, well, the pads extend a little bit further out from the actual package. So in theory, what I'm going to try to do here, make sure our soldering iron tip is good and clean. We're going to preload some solder on here, and yes, I do use leaded solder for this kind of stuff. Honestly, I think lead-free is garbage. It just doesn't work very well. So this is 60-40 lead solder. I might have some 63-37 kicking around, which might even be better for this, but don't really feel like looking for it right now. So I'm going to go ahead and carefully apply some solder here. And be careful not to melt that PCI Express port. And see, that's just the thing. Stuff will move around. So you gotta be careful not to melt this PCI Express port or this fan connection there. Either of those, we don't want to damage them. So ideally, for stuff like this, a hot air station would be great. And that's something I'm going to eventually get, is a hot air station. It's specifically designed for this kind of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to use the desoldering wick to remove some of this solder here because it's kind of bridging on a couple of these pins over here. Honestly, I was anticipating this would happen. Okay, so I've taken some time to try to clean this up a bit and get that excess solder off of there. What really helped was adding in some solder paste flux along with this soldering braid. The paste flux did help the soldering braid wick up the excess solder. So then I went in and with a Q-tip with some rubbing alcohol, try to clean up a bit. But let's go and get a look here. Yes, it's just a tad crooked on the board, but it looks okay otherwise. So now I'm just letting that dry a little bit, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook up a power supply to this. Now the initial way I'm going to test this board is I'm only going to attach a power supply to it. I'm not even going to install a CPU or memory or a graphics card in it yet. Just want to power it up, see if it lets out any magic smoke, make sure this chip here doesn't get hot, and things like that. If that looks okay, then I will install a CPU, and we'll see if this will post. If it does not post, then I will assume that this BIOS chip or EEPROM is blank and doesn't have anything on it. Now there is a possibility that this seller could have sourced this chip from, let's say, DigiKey, and I know DigiKey does offer a service when you order microcontrollers or things like EEPROMs and stuff like that, where they can flash it for you for a charge, I think. But if it's not flashed with anything, then I'll look up and see if there's any way this motherboard supports USB flash, but I don't think that would even work because we're dealing with a blank BIOS chip. So the motherboard would actually have no UEFI to actually start it. So that being said, I would have to go out and purchase a programmer for this to program it. Okay, so I have the motherboard plugged into this power supply. Again, we don't have any components on it yet. No CPU, no RAM, no graphics card. We want to see what this does here. So basically all I'm doing is I'm just running the 5-volt standby to this motherboard, not even powering it up yet. Now sometimes when you have a short circuit in a chip like this, one sign will be that it'll get hot. That's not happening so far. So I'm going to attempt to start this. Now, it may not start at all since there's no CPU in the board, but we shall see. Okay, yeah, it's not going to start without a processor installed, so shut off power to the power supply, let it discharge, and then I'm going to jumper green and black to force the PSU to turn on. Alright. That's why I like this little unit here. It has a built-in LED to tell you when it is powered. When it has 5 volt standby, or when it has power good. Alright, so we'll hold that in there. Power supply is running. So what we're going to do next, we're going to install our CPU. And since our processor is not an APU, it's just a Ryzen 7 1700X, I'm going to have to install a graphics card. That way we'll have video. I'll install 1 stick of DDR4 memory, and we'll see what we get. I'm betting that this BIOS chip is blank, has nothing on it. Which, if that's the case, we'll get no post. But who knows, maybe we might be in for a surprise. Maybe this thing will actually come to life. We shall see. Okay, so I now have a Ryzen 7 1700X processor installed. I got, let's see, I think it's an 8GB stick of RAM over there. Now this graphics card is quite old for this setup. It's a GeForce 210. I think it'll work okay, but we shall see. Okay, the moment of truth, let's see if this thing will start. I'll be really surprised if it does. Yeah, nothing at all. Okay, so I got a different power supply hooked up because I noticed something. Apparently earlier when I was trying to start this, I didn't have the screwdriver exactly on there right, but watch what happens here. It briefly started and then shut off because it tripped out the short circuit protection on the power supply. Yeah, that's not a good sign. Definitely not a good sign. So right now the power supply on is latched, and that's why it's out and this fan is not running. For example, if I unplug this power supply, and wait a moment here. If I plug it back in, you can see light is back on. Yeah, there's definitely something wrong with this motherboard. And it might be more than just that BIOS chip. Just for example, did that just to go ahead and drain out the power supply. If I disconnect our CPU power connection, and plug this back in. That's why I like that other unit, because it has a switch on the back of it. If I attempt to start it this time, same deal. So yeah, there's definitely something going on there. Okay everybody, just for a little context here. So these two power supplies that I just used here to test this board, apparently both of them are having capacitor issues. I'm going to have to recap them. Because the second one there, you saw how it appeared that it tripped down on a short circuit. Turns out there's nothing wrong electrically wise with this motherboard. It was the capacitors probably in the supervisor circuit in the power supply going bad, and therefore causing the unit to do some weird things. It didn't do any harm, of course. It just the power supply shut itself down, obviously. But as you'll see in a moment, I'm going to try out a different supply, and this thing will start up. But will it post? We shall see. Okay, so a little update. I had to try a different power supply. It's funny, this Hypro unit right here has a little issue to where the power good signal will not come on until a couple minutes after you plug this thing in and run it. But now that it's giving out power good, it's sending power good to the motherboard, and you can see the motherboard starting up, but watch what it does here. You see how it shuts off and restarts? This behavior is exactly what my mid-tower Lux system did with that defective Ryzen 5700G processor. This is exactly, to a T, what it did. It would turn on, not post, run for about 15-20 seconds, cut off, cut back on. This is exactly what it did. Now, the reason why I got the fan plugged in over here was this is a 3-pin fan, and I was wanting to see if perhaps it would throttle down the fan if I plugged it into the chassis fan header, and clearly it's not. But yeah, really bizarre behavior. But this might perhaps be a sign that the BIOS chip may have something on it. Not sure. Perhaps what I may do is I may go ahead and order that USB EEPROM flasher device that clamps onto the chip, and I'll look up the proper BIOS for this board, because I have no idea whatsoever where this chip came from. Honestly, I have no idea. There's no telling if there's anything on it at all, or if it has the BIOS for the wrong motherboard on it, which might explain why this motherboard is acting so freaking weird. But what was very bizarre was with two Bestech power supplies, my test unit, which is over there, as well as this ATX 25012Z unit up here, they didn't like this motherboard for some reason. Now, generally, Bestech supplies, from at least my experience, they power these AM4 boards just fine when you have, let's say, a 95 watt TDP or less processor in them. But yeah, it might be capacitors or something like that. This unit I had recapped, but it's having some sort of issue to where the power good signal isn't good right off the bat. But it powered this thing right up, and yeah, at first I thought there was a short circuit somewhere in this, because yeah, it was really bizarre. I was getting like 11.6 volts out of the Bestech unit, the 312Z, that unit sitting over there. Yeah, getting like 11.6 volts out of it when trying to power up this thing. Yeah, something definitely going on with that unit. I need to recap it. But yeah, so I think my next step for this is going to be order that flasher. I thought this board was a goner, but apparently maybe it just needs to have the BIOS flashed to the proper BIOS. We shall see what happens. So anyways, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.